You start wondering what you're going to put on your plates, right? Lunchtime. And lunchtime, and what it is you're going to put on your plate is a pivotal question in the session we're going to have now. As you know, it's entitled Rethinking Nutrition from Field to Table. That means your choices, what you put on your table and on your plate, actually can make a big difference. Before introducing you, the speakers of the session, let me tell you a bit more about who I am. I'm Catherine Segal. I'm the Deputy Editor-in-Chief of GEO. We have our editor here. GEO is a monthly magazine. Many of you who are French here might know us. We're a picture magazine, a feature magazine. We appeared for the first time in France in the late 70s, March 1979, exactly. So it's exactly 45 years ago. Back in the day, there were 4.3 billion people on the planet, and climate change and planetary limits were not really at the center of the conversation. Still, GEO was reporting about the interactions between human beings and their environment already at that time, obviously. That's what made us famous. 45 years later, sorry, the panorama has changed quite a bit. There are now 8 million people on the planet. Climate change, planetary limits, those are at the center of the conversation now. And of course, GEO keeps reporting all the more about humans' interactions with their environment. Let me, before introducing to you this session, let me run by you some numbers just for background purposes. According to the United Nations, about 1/3 of all human-caused greenhouse gas emissions are linked to food production, retail, and consumption. Second, as you know, animal-based foods, especially red meat, dairy, and also farmed shrimp, are usually associated to the highest emissions. Third fact, which is quite puzzling, is that nowadays we produce enough food to feed the entire planet. And still, about 10% of the planet don't have what they need to eat. And last fact I would like to run by you is that around 35 to 30%, according to the source, of all the food we produce ends up as waste. So how to produce the best food for humans without harming the environment, and maybe even while doing good, while helping the environment? This is what we're going to discuss here. First with Reniera O'Donnell from the Allon MacArthur Foundation, who's going to give us the first keynote. And then we have a panel discussion with 3 key players in the future of the food ecosystem. That's Santiago Gowland from the Rainforest Alliance, Allon Zeitoun of Quantis, and Julius Strauss of FoodLabs. And last, we'll have a chat with Bren Smith of GreenWave. Bren has a very inspiring story. As he started out in life as an industrial fisherman up there in the northern seas, right, Bren? And he changed life. He knows quite something about changing, right? He changed life, and he became a pioneer in ocean regenerative farming. But please first welcome Reniera O'Donnell, who's food initiative lead at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And Reniera, you're going to delve deeper into what it means to design food that allows nature to thrive. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Catherine. What is the right decision that we can make as a consumer to help fix our broken food system? We live in a world with so much choice, choices we often have to make in split seconds at a supermarket shelf. Do I put my own health first? Perhaps I should be championing farmers and fair trade. What about soil health? What about eating out to help the economy? Should I cook at home and eat in to save the economy? What about local, seasonal, free range? So many choices. And none of those answer the question, will my children eat it? In truth, there is no single choice and no single solution that we can make to fix this broken food system. What we need is a full reimagining of the food system we have today. Let's imagine for a moment a food system where, at the minimum, every choice you make as a consumer is one that is good for nature. Every cereal box you buy, every box of eggs, carton of milk, cold drink, all your snacks and treats, where every single one of those is helping to build soil health, building back biodiversity, and leading to clean water and clean air. Where the choices that you make about what you put in your basket in the supermarket make nature healthier. This is a food system we can have when we start to think differently about how food is designed. Now, Catherine has shared some incredibly daunting stats about greenhouse gas emissions related to the food system and the amount of food that is going to waste. And we can add to that. The way in which we produce and consume food is responsible for over half of human-induced biodiversity loss. The food we are creating is killing the very ecosystems upon which it is dependent. And we designed it that way. To be fair, we did it with great intentions. Coming out of 2 world wars with a calorie-poor world, how do we feed it? And we enabled millions of people to have access to healthy, calorie-rich food. But we didn't think, or didn't know at the time, the impact a lot of those decisions would have on our natural ecosystems. Things like large-scale industrial farming, artificial inputs such as fertilizers and pesticides. And what about the antibiotics used in large-scale livestock production? But we do now. Now we know. We know that for every £1 that we spend on food, there are £2 of external costs related to our own health and to the health of the planet. But it stands to reason that if we design the food system that we have today, we can redesign it to put nature at the heart of it. We can rebuild the ecosystems that we have depleted. So where currently our food system is one of the biggest drivers of our global challenges and the triple planetary crises, it is also probably the greatest opportunity that we have to be able to address those same challenges. We can and must redesign the food system to enable nature to thrive. But what does that mean? Well, it means that we need to design a food system that enables farmers to farm like Tamalu Farm in Kenya, and not like Tamalu's neighbors. What do we mean by food design? When we talk about food design, we talk about all the design decisions that go into getting food to your plate. So we start with a product concept, like with anything. Then we think about the ingredients that need to go into it. From there, we think about where those ingredients are sourced from. And finally, how it is packaged to get to the consumer. And currently, all of those decisions are driven by things like cost, accessibility, taste, how it feels on the inside of your mouth, chemical composition. And every single one of those decisions has a corresponding impact on the environment from which those ingredients are sourced. So we need to be intentional about the design decisions that we make. And when we start to overlay circular design decisions with food design, we can start to see a food system that really does put nature at its heart. In 2021, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation released the Big Food Redesign Study. This study looked at what would happen if you overlaid circular design solutions onto food design. And we modeled this on wheat, on dairy, potatoes, and sweeteners in the UK and the EU. And the results were astounding. As you can see from the graph, we got significant improvements in reduction in biodiversity loss, in reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. We increased the total food output, to be fair, after a transition period, and ultimately farmers made more money. And this was compared to farming the same things as we farm now, but doing it better, so better sourcing. It creates a really compelling story. But what do we actually mean? What we mean is that upstream design decisions about the food that we buy on our supermarket shelves really can be connected to improvements in the landscape that those ingredients come from. And there are 4 key design opportunities that we can use to achieve this. The first one of those is that all ingredients should come from regenerative production systems. Now, we have defined those systems at the Foundation as systems that lead to better soil health, better biodiversity, clean air, and clean water. Very aware there is a much wider suite of outcomes from regenerative farming practices, but those are the ones that we're going to concentrate on. We also know that those practices vary from geography to geography, from farm to farm, from crop to crop. But ultimately, the outcome is the same. Nature is better as a result of those practices. And let's not forget that regenerating nature is a key principle of the circular economy. But as we saw from the graph, nature needs more than just farming the same stuff as we farm today, but farming it better. Nature needs diversity. And so the second design strategy that you can use is to design in diversity. Diversity of ingredients, but also diversity of variants. So, maybe instead of using the Cavendish banana, which is the regular banana that we all see on our supermarket shelves, you design a smoothie using the Indian apple banana, which is smaller and more flavoursome. And by doing this, you signal to banana growers that there is a market for them to plant and grow banana varieties that are more suited to their local context, that are more resilient, and therefore require less artificial inputs. And that is exactly what Kenco did when they designed their purple smoothie that you can see on the screen. But we also need more than this. So the third design opportunity that you can use is lower impact ingredients. Now, Catherine mentioned livestock, and there is a lot of debate about the role of livestock in the food system. And there is no doubt that moving away from animal proteins and using more plant proteins is going to have a significant effect on our landscape and greenhouse gas emissions. But livestock also play a really, really crucial role in a regenerative farming system through their natural fertilization and tilling capabilities. So lower impact doesn't just refer to moving from less but better sourced animal proteins to plant proteins, but also about the kinds of crops that you are using. So perhaps you might swap some of your wheat for something like legume, pea flour, like Brave Cereals does. This signals to farmers that they could plant or intercrop with their wheat legumes which lock in nitrogen, again, leading to less reliance on artificial inputs that clog up our waterways and ruin our soils. The last design strategy that we're going to look at is upcycling. Now, keeping products and materials in use, or nutrients in the case of food, is another key principle of the circular economy. And upcycling from what is currently considered waste can deliver huge benefits in terms of both financial and in terms of land sparing for the need to plant virgin crops, therefore reducing the land use requirements of our growing food system. As Catherine has said, much of the food that's produced goes to waste. And if not to waste, it gets cascaded through animal feed and then into compost. But let's imagine for a moment that we harvested from all the on-farm crop leftovers sucrose and cellulose to produce sugars or building materials. In fact, our modeling through the Big Food Redesign study showed that we just needed to take 1.5% of all the on-farm crop residues to take out sucrose and create glucose syrup, which would more than adequately cover the global need for glucose syrup and spare a land the size of Luxembourg from planting virgin crops. So there are 4 circular design strategies that are needed to put nature at the heart of our food system. And that, coupled with packaging that supports a circular economy, and we created a circular design for food framework that can be used to guide food decisions as a designer. But can this really work? And it's all very well to have reports and modeling. Can we actually design food products for nature to thrive? And this was a question that we asked ourselves when we launched the Big Food Redesign Challenge in May 2023. It was a complete gamble. We had no idea how the sector would engage, but we laid down a challenge. We said, use the circular design for food framework and design or redesign food products, putting nature at their heart. Well, we're 10 months on, and we can say with absolute certainty it is possible to design food products that enable nature to thrive. Working with Hauger through their Lattice system and the Sustainable Food Trust, we designed an assessment framework. And from the 186 products submitted in the challenge, 166 were assessed as successfully meeting the challenge criteria, which were that the majority of their constituent products came from regenerative farming systems. They included at least one other of those design strategies, and their packaging was on a journey to circularity. And these products came from 71 companies and covered multiple countries and multiple food categories. So what does it look like? Well, it looks like those Kenko smoothies and it looks like Brave cereals, but it looks like a whole lot more. It looks like cereals that use diverse wheats and diverse oats and that swap out grains for legumes, enabling farmers to have better farming rotations and reducing impact on landscapes. It looks like this pancake mix, where they use regeneratively sourced fava bean flour and the primary packaging dissolves in the liquid when you add it to make your pancakes. It looks like burgers, where 25% of the beef is swapped out for seaweed, reducing the impact of greenhouse gas emissions from the cattle used to produce the beef and contributing to regenerative oceans. And sticking with the regenerative properties of seaweed, and I know Bren is going to talk about that in a little bit, it looks like beer, which I've tasted and is absolutely delicious, grown using regeneratively farmed grains and flavored using seaweed from a local regenerative ocean farm. It looks like our ready meals. Stoke's fantastic range of ready meals, which swap out all the animal proteins for plant proteins, and where the plants are grown in organic farming systems. But it also looks like a delicious ready meal beef bourguignon, where again a percentage of the beef is replaced with mushrooms. Delighted to share, it also looks like some of our absolute favorite treats, like Nutri candies, which are from Latin America, where the cocoa is grown in agroforestry systems, and they also use ingredients which come from the cocoa processing process. It looks like beloved chocolate bars, where they use interesting ingredients like spirulina, which add to the health properties of the chocolate, but also diverse ingredients. Or Rio Nueva's drinking chocolate, where they're working with Ecuadorian cocoa farmers that work in regenerative farming systems. So it means that our indulgent snacks are really good for nature, even if they are a bit naughty for us. It looks like banana peels that have been upcycled to make a delicious new sack that is sweetened with coconut sugar. And it looks like gin that is made from no grains at all. Working with heritage apple farmers, Amalthea Dry Gin uses apple to make its base spirit, and the refills come in an aluminium bottle. I guess what I'm trying to say is it looks exactly like the kinds of things that we buy today, only with intentional, nature-enhancing design decisions built into those food products. And it's not just the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the 71 organizations involved in the Big Food Redesign Challenge who think that. Retailers are quickly realizing that they have a crucial role to play in supporting a more regenerative food system. In the UK, Waitrose and Fortnum & Mason have both committed to stocking a selection of these successful products on their shelves for 6 months from early 2025, bringing these products to consumers. And in Latin America, Carrefour Brazil are doing the same. But they're not the only ones. We've had huge interest from retailers around the world to be able to bring these types of products to consumers and take consumers on the journey. And it's not surprising that there's been huge interest. Our early analysis of the product has shown that overall, the suite of products is significantly better in terms of biodiversity compared to their industry standards. And overall, across all the metrics that we looked at, this suite of products, again, scores much better than their industry standards. So one of the big statistics that came out of our report was that the top 10 fast-moving consumer goods and retailers across the EU and the UK have influenced over 40% of the agricultural land in those same geographies. We know that at the moment, that influence is not giving us healthy landscapes, healthy soils. But equally, it could. And they could redesign their product portfolios, putting what landscapes need at the heart of those food design decisions. The products in the Big Food Redesign Challenge have categorically shown that it is possible. We're on a journey with these food manufacturers and retailers who've been brave enough to think differently about the kinds of foods that they try to sell us. And over the next 12 months, we're going to be working with these participants, learning from them, finding out what works, what doesn't work, what's easy, what's hard. What legislation and policy changes do we need to be able to enable this new circular food system and gear up towards normalizing circular design for food by 2030? But nobody can do this on their own. We all need to work together to really bring this to life, to put life back in our soils, back in our waterways, and to build healthy ecosystems through food. So here's a question I'll leave you with. Can you see a future where every decision you make about the food that you buy is a good one for nature? Because I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Reniera, for this. So now I'm calling on stage Santiago, Gowland, Allon, Zeitoun, Julius, Strauss. Please take a seat. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Good morning. Thank you for being here at ChangeNOW. So just a minute ago, Reniera explained that redesigning the food system, changing the way we are producing, distributing, and actually eating food can make a big difference, can stop harming the planet, and actually restore our ecosystems, maybe. But it's a journey, so we're going to go through that journey together. And as the title of our session says, from field to table, I suggest we start with fields, with the supply side of the story. And maybe I'm turning to you, Santiago. You're Santiago Gowland, the CEO of the Rainforest Alliance. It's a very well-known international non-profit organization working at the intersection of business, agriculture, and forests, right? So please tell us more about yourself, your organization, and what is it that you do to make things change on the supply side of the story.
Thank you, Catherine. And yeah, I mean, probably you know the Rainforest Alliance from the green frog, right? I remember when I was at Unilever many years ago, when I started my career on sustainability, I was living in London, I was a big fan of the Rainforest Alliance. I loved the follow the frog and also the simplification of these choices, you know, as a consumer. But then life went on, and 3 years ago I was asked to join the organization and lead these 800 people that work across 50 countries on this very question: how do we change the way we do produce food today, right? And the forestry side of the Rainforest Alliance. And the beauty about, or what I love about the Rainforest Alliance is they work on these two levers. supply and demand, because you can't change a market if you don't change the supply, in what you produce, and also how you consume it. You need to change the two, and they need to be reinforcing each other in order to transform the market. So we work with 4 million farmers on the supply side, and then on the community and landscape project, 3 million more farmers, and also with 5,000 companies on the demand side. So it's been working for 35 years on driving practices to transform the way we do agriculture. And why? Because when you look at the theme of today, and I've been hearing in many other panels the same question, right now, around 45% of people can't afford a healthy diet. In countries like mine, I come from Argentina, it's 86%, right? So in developing countries, it's even bigger, the issue of people lacking the main nutrition to develop the brain and their, potential as human beings. And the reason why is because these industrialized systems that have been driving agriculture, in a way, they've been sort of killing the nutrition of the soil, right? And the health of the soil, leaving land barren to a point where when you don't have nutrition in the soil, you don't have nutrition in the food. It's as simple as that. The biology, the richness of the soil, the carbon inside the soil is what drives the nutrition of the food you eat. That's a correlation. But the amazing thing, as you were saying on the MacArthur Foundation, and I've been hearing also around this, the amazing thing is that it can be the opposite. I mean, like, if you apply regenerative practices and farming in the soil, you can actually boost the nutrition of those ingredients. And by doing that, also have probably the most powerful tool to tackle the triple crisis of climate, biodiversity, and social development, because by insetting or sinking carbon in the soil, you're using the biggest nature-based, in a way, asset, which is land extension, right? And using it as a carbon sequestration mechanism. And also the whole biology of the soil, the biodiversity of the soils, and the protection of the forests also boost biodiversity. But as was also mentioned before, it boosts productivity. So it makes income for producers more attractive, right? And I've seen this in many farms that work with the Rainforest Alliance, like, for example, Aquiares in Costa Rica. It's one of the biggest farms we work with on coffee. It's just amazing. We've been working with them for 17 years, so they're very, very evolved. But you can see how the way they are farming using the Rainforest Alliance regenerative agriculture framework, the way they are farming the coffee, and the way they are connecting ecological corridors for biodiversity, and the way they are looking at the brand and the premiumization of the product is really having results. So I'll stop there, just saying at the end of the day, it is a complex problem that requires companies, as what was your name, the name of the MacArthur Foundation?
Reniera.
That was kind of brilliant, because, I mean, it's like that design of how you design your products, for regeneration of soils and communities, requires companies to lead on this agenda, governments to align incentives, also consumers to be informed, because they have a right to know and a right to choose what to do, and also the NGO and all the kind of the social sector to work better together, in stronger alliances.
We'll come to consumers in a minute. First, maybe Allon. Thank you so much, Santiago. Allon, you're the global leader and managing director of Quantis. Quantis is a Swiss consulting firm, is that right? Helping large companies in their sustainable transformation. But you're also the ex-former CEO of Naturalia, which is in France, I think, the leading retailer in organic food. What's your take about that necessary evolution on the supply side of the food chain?
Thanks. I'm very happy to be here. I would say first that we can be positive, because I think change is happening as you describe it in the farm you mentioned. But in the Western world, the sustainability is happening. in the food business. Let's take like the three main shifts that need to happen. One is going to organic or regenerative practices. The other might be to reduce meat production, and third one might be having less processed foods or packaged foods. And it's actually happening. Our organic food, you mentioned it, I've been in the business for 10 years, and it's been growing double digits in every European country for the past 20 years, and reaching some quite good level now. Meat, you have a number of alternatives to meat products in milk or in whatever you can eat that is amazing, both from large companies and startups. So clearly, it's happening right now from companies that are really driving the change. Then comes, is it faster? Or say differently, can we go faster and deeper because we need to? And maybe three things that needs to happen to do so. One is about regulation. Second one is about companies working more deeply with sustainable and incorporating in everything that they do. And third one is about technological shifts. First one, regulation, it's obvious, but it actually works. While I was in an organic business in 2019, there was this law that prevented organic producers of vegetables to use heated greenhouses. You have to know that heated greenhouses make it 8 times more impactful than unheated greenhouses. And just regulation stopped it. So when it's rightly designed, regulation do have an impact immediately. Second is about how you incorporate the sustainability in everything that we do. That's exactly what we are doing at Quantis, for example, with all the clients that we are supporting. It's about ensuring that you have the right data to measure the impact, because it's quite complicated actually to measure the impact, especially if you take into account not only climate, but also biodiversity, water, etc. And then how do we incorporate it in everything you do, design, pricing, allocation of marketing, etc. But actually it's happening right now. And just for an example of this, because it was announced this morning, Unilever, has decided to exit from ice cream because it's too intensive in terms of climate. So it's actually happening, and companies are actually divesting from this kind of too impactful businesses. And last but not least is about technical shifts. It needs to happen. Plant-based solution will happen. Regenerative also is some kind of craftsman work right now. Needs to go at scale. It will need more digitalized, mechanized solutions to be at scale. So technical digital shift will bring a lot, and I think Julius can talk more about it.
Yes, thank you for the transition, Julius. Your turn. What do you do at FoodLabs to make things change? What's cooking in your labs?
Yeah, at FoodLabs we invest in startups along the entire value chain of food and agriculture, and usually investing quite early, meaning coming in as the first institutional investor. What I found quite interesting so far is we've been speaking a lot about the system as it is right now and how we can improve it. Things like, for example, regenerative agriculture, I think, are very promising, and we've also invested in companies in that space, and definitely believe that the future of farming has to be more regenerative and also more sustainable. Santiago, you, for example, mentioned the problem that our soils are depleting, and obviously if there are no more nutrients in our soils, there also won't be any nutrients in our food that we eat every day. Another thing that we at FoodLabs are also quite excited about is sort of the decoupling of food from the field. There's this term of lab-grown meat, for example. Mm-hmm. So for example, if we look at the whole market of proteins, I think so far we have the animal-based proteins, and then we have the plant-based proteins that you just mentioned, Allon. But at the same time, there's also a lot of very motivated founders out there that try to, in the end, harness science and, for example, microbes to come up with new ways to produce proteins. So new technologies like, for example, fermentation or also cell cultivation are topics that we at FoodLabs at least believe will play a more and more important role in the future.
Tell us more about that. What about fermentation? What's all the hype about that?
Yeah, so for example, when looking at fermentation, one technology that I think is very exciting is the whole topic of mycelium. So mycelium are the roots of mushrooms. And by fermenting them, you can get meat replacements that in the end are very similar in taste and also in texture compared to traditional animal-based meats. And At the same time, production is much more sustainable, less land is required, less water is required, there's less greenhouse gas emissions in the process. And it's also circular. We had the topic of circular economy in the keynote right before. So I think a great example is we have a portfolio company called MushLabs. They're working with mycelium, and one of their investors is a quite big German brewery. And as of today, they have a lot of brewer spent grain, which is sometimes used as animal feed, but also oftentimes just thrown away, despite being a quite valuable resource. So now we have a company like MushLabs coming in that can use it as feedstock for their production systems and upcycling those nutrients, ingredients for, in the end, more nutritious and also more sustainable proteins.
Well, thank you so much. It's exciting, exciting perspectives ahead. So let's switch to the demand side of the issue. How can people change what they consume? You tell us about what is expecting them. They have to change how they consume. They have to change what they consume. Allon, as the former CEO of Naturalia, you know quite a bit about retail and about consumers and their behavior. What do you think?
It's very frustrating. Very, very frustrating because you try to convey stories to the consumers and you try to change the habits, but it does not work. Let's come back to this story about meat. So meat alternatives, there are like a ton of them. You know, as I said, as you described, you know, on the supply side, you can buy everything that you want in terms of meat alternatives. Actually, does the switch happen? No. Not sufficiently deeper. So the key question is, you know, we have explained why it's not bad, what it needs to happen, but it does not happen. So coming to your question about Reniera at the end, you know, actually, yes, we can do, but actually it does not happen. So key question is, how do you do that? Yeah. Actually, maybe I would still be at Natural if I had the answer, because it would be like, thriving like hell. So it's very complicated answer. But let's say there are at least, I think, also three answers to this one. First is we have a global plan, a global national plan to push for it. Second is you have, as a private company, to have a simple solution. And you have to have solutions that provide actual benefits for the consumer. Let me go into each of one. First one is clear. You have to have a national plan that does encompass not only nutritional elements or private interests from agricultural bodies, but also, and you have to encompass those two, but also sustainability into it. Meaning that you have to have national plan in France. I mean, in the UK, every country has its own. You have to incorporate into it to reduce your meat production. You have to increase much more the education that goes with it. And when I mean education, it's not about children, but also about grown-up, etc. So it's about public body encompassing the sustainability into what they do. Second one is about make it simple. I've been a retailer, as you said, for 10 years. And actually, I think you mentioned it also when you make your speech. A consumer, when he goes through the LS, he has maybe a tenth of a second to make his decision. Whatever you put in the pack doesn't make any impact. You just have to put, a green flag, or red flag, and that's it. Anything else, don't bother, because he has 1/10 of a second. So be very simple. And there is some apps like Yuka that some of you may know if you are depending on your country that provide with a very simple information, but you still have to flash it. So the more simple, the easier to change the consumer, because actually let's face it, the attention of the consumer is reducing every year. So red or green flags, that's it. And last but not least is about also the benefits that you provide. You cannot, nature can only be it's never going to be the only criteria through which you will buy a food. You need nutrition, because nutrition is necessary for what we buy food. Price is a one. Taste is another one, depending on the country, but in France it's very high in the list. Sustainability is part of it, and maybe also can make it is a fifth one. So there are a number of criteria. And actually, if you want to buy sustainability, you have to tackle all those criteria. You cannot just come with when I was an organic retailer, people would come with Fevrol. Fevrol, who know it's some food that we give to the horses. So yes, it's good in terms of proteins. It's cheap, but nobody will eat it. So you have to take a lot of the favorite and provide with very good value proposition if you want to for the people to buy it.
Okay, thank you, Allon. Makes sense, right? At the end of the day, you have to eat what's in your plate. So if it's not palatable, you won't try it. Julius, what do you know about consumers? You need to know those because otherwise, everything that's cooking in your labs won't work, right? So did you study them? What do you know about them?
Yeah, I think one topic that we discuss quite a lot internally is the whole topic of gene modification and how or whether consumers are actually going to accept that and be willing to buy products that are or have been gene modified in their production process.
Okay.
I think as of today, GMO still has a very bad reputation overall, and consumers are quite hesitant. However, at the same time, I think there are many, many examples out there that show that already in our system, our food production system today, it is being used and consumers are accepting it. To give one example, for producing cheese or dairy products, you need an enzyme called rennet, which has traditionally been sourced from the stomach of calves. So not a very eco-friendly and also animal-friendly process. Until a couple or many years ago by now, there was a new process being developed using microbials and more specifically mostly bacteria and gene modification to actually produce that enzyme that then breaks down the cheese and is a vital component of producing cheese. And I think today, as of today, already like 98 or 99% of the cheese that's being sold in the US is being produced by using this gene-modified rennet, which I think is a great example for how consumers in the end are willing to adopt. However, I think there's also a lot of education going to be needed. Especially here in Europe, we are quite hesitant, or many say quite slow in admitting new products that have been gene-modified. So for example, in our portfolio, I think all of the companies that have or are working on new and alternative proteins are usually going to Singapore first, or maybe to the US to enter the market, because there the admission process is much, much faster. My hope, at least, is that, they have to go through the regulatory process in Europe now as well. And at FoodLabs, we hope that once they also have the approval in Europe, it's also a good sign or in the end, a good sign for the consumers, because as said, in Europe, they're a bit more cautious. There's more regulatory processes in place. But once you get through all of those processes and get your products admitted, I think it should be quite strong in the end indicator for consumers that what they are able to buy then is safe.
When we spoke before, you told me you're not a big fan of insects. You're not working too much with insects, although it's one of the most debated food of the future, well known of the audience. What do you think?
At least as FoodLabs, we haven't invested in any insect-based proteins so far. Mm-hmm. I think there are good concepts out there, strong companies. However, from a venture perspective, at least so far, we haven't found a case that fully convinced us. I think mostly because in the end, it's still very capex intensive. In a way, it is a dirty process still. You still have animals in the value chain. If you look at, fermentation, at cell cultivation, I guess one of the main drivers behind those technologies is that in the end, you want to take the animal out of the production system. And in the end, insects, they might not be as cute as, a cow, for example, but it's still an animal.
They are still animals. Thank you, Julius. Santiago, what do you think? I think the Rainforest Alliance has a global approach, right? As you said before, holistic approach, inclusive of consumers.
Yeah, I think it started with knowledge that to change a market, you need to change supply and demand, as I said before, right? Now, in the case of food companies, fast-moving consumer goods companies like Unilever, Mars, Hershey's, etc., 80% of the value is on the intangible assets, on the brand. If you don't engage and lead with the brand as well as the supply, you can't really see transformation at speed and scale we need, right? So, the question then, for me in the food sector is a bit simpler than in other sectors, like, personal care or home care, etc. Why? Because the beauty of the food sector is that the care that you put into the supply, the production of your raw materials, the carbon you insert in the ground, the nutrition in the soil, the health in the soil, is directly connected to the quality and the nutrition of the product. So you have a reinforcing loop between your investment and effort on the supply with the functional benefits, the consumer benefits. It's a healthier product, it's a kind of more nutritious product, more sustainable one, so it reinforces your brand proposition. And this reinforcing loop hardly exists in other categories. For example, if you're a shampoo brand and you say, I'm going to reduce plastic, it seems great, reduce plastic, but it won't do anything for your hair. I mean, it's kind of completely disconnected from the consumer benefit, functional benefit, may have an emotional benefit, right? So for me, really, I mean, like the unlocking this kind of a brand and demand piece of this equation is a huge opportunity. I believe that, in the Rainforest Alliance, we really believe that consumers have a right to know, and they have a right to choose. And you were talking, Allon, about the simplification, right? The seal of the Rainforest Alliance that has been there for a long time, it's an amazing simplifier, because behind that seal, there is a very robust program that looks at climate, biodiversity, social development, etc., in an integrated way, right? So it really kind of allows that, quick choice by the consumer, knowing that that's going to be better. So my kind of recommendation on this one is, like, maybe in the next 10 years, 3 things need to happen. The first one is sustainability inside companies. For anybody that is working on companies here, needs to be integrated, like the chief supply chain officer and the chief sustainability officer need to work with the CMO. They need to be kind of one team, because it's about what MacArthur Foundation was talking about, the design at the beginning, right? The second thing is we need to begin to lead the consumer, because if this is the future of coffee, the future of cocoa, you can't just say, no, well, consumers don't care. You need to find the way to engage, create that understanding, create that movement, because it's the future of your organization at the end of the day. And marketing has amazing power today to really inform and engage people through big data. I mean, there's so much data points that companies have about us, even kids of 14 years old, through social media, etc. So it's really a marketing challenge, right? And the third one is really kind of, how do we make sure that whatever marketing says is really connected to impact? So because greenwash is a big, big risk for this agenda, because it damages the trust on consumers. So that's my 2 cents on this one.
Thank you, Santiago. So thank you all, but before we wrap up the conversation, maybe you were talking about the future. We'll keep on with that a little bit. To have a little bit of futurology here. Julius, maybe would you like to tell us what you think the nutrition ecosystem will be like in, say, 10 years?
Yeah, of course. I think there's a lot of black and white thinking at the moment. For example, when I speak to founders that work on some sort of lab-grown meat, they always tell me in 10 years it's only going to be lab-grown meat. There's no longer going to be any animal-based meat. At the same time, when speaking to a founder working on regenerative agriculture, he's going to tell me, oh, the future is all about regenerative agriculture and so on. I personally believe, let's say 10 years from now, it's going to be a healthy mix of all of the previously described, leading to an overall more sustainable but also more resilient food production system. Because I think another point that we also always need to keep in mind is the whole topic of food security. We have a growing population. By 2050, it's expected we expect it to be 10 billion people on the planet, and in the end, feeding all of those people is not going to be easy, and with our current system, probably not going to be possible. So we need change, and I think in the end, it's going to be a more sustainable mix of the previously mentioned technologies.
Thank you, Julius. Santiago, you want to add something to your predictions?
We have Daniel there, the founder of the Rainforest Alliance, just arrived. So I'm going to, use a kind of a concept we shared in Ghana on a board meeting. I'm going to be a little bit more binary, right? Food today is one of the biggest problems we have, right? So 80% greenhouse gas deforestation, 25% greenhouse gas emissions. 4 out of 5 people living in rural areas live in poverty, right? But at the same time, it's this kind of amazing force, 40% of global employment, 12% of global GDP. So it's this amazing force that can actually be probably the most effective and fastest, tool to tackle climate, biodiversity, and social development if you do it right. So, for me, the future of food needs to be a future where, agriculture, food production play to create a world where people and nature can thrive in harmony together, which is the mission of the Rainforest Alliance. And because if it doesn't, right, when you look at scenarios and trends on, coffee production, cocoa production, there is a real issue around land, to keep that production because of the lack of resilience and lack of adaptation to climate change. So if we don't begin to accelerate these regen practices, probably we won't have coffee to enjoy and also, air and water to enjoy. So, yeah.
So, Allon, are you optimistic about 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of aligned with what you described. I think it will be still at the middle of the bridge. We won't have go for it. And I'm pretty confident for one kind of supply chain where it will be all traceable with no deforestation and circularity at the end. So maybe in the Western world we'll kind of live in this kind of country for part of our value chain. But I'm kind of guessing that not the whole world will be as it.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you to each of you.
Thank you, Catherine.
For this conversation. Thank you.
You're kind of the quiet moderator of the whole kind of conference.
Here. So before we welcome our next speaker, I would like just to run by you again some key facts, but not too many of them, don't worry. Don't be afraid. Just let's consider that more than 3 billion people are depending on fishing or ocean-farmed food for their subsistence. 3 billion people out of the 8 billions. And the second figure I wanted to give you is that the proportion of overfished stocks has reached 35%, again, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, 35%, and 57% more are at risk of becoming overfished. So when oceans suffer, the entire planet is at risk. And food supply, protein supply, we were discussing protein supply a while ago, is at risk. To discuss this, I would like to call on stage Bren Smith. Bren is the founder and co-executive director of GreenWave. Hello, Bren.
Hi.
Bren, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Actually, the title of this session should be, in your case, not from field to table, but probably from oceans to table, right?
Yep.
I introduced you very briefly a while ago, but let me add that you grew up in Newfoundland, Canada, and you started in life as a fisherman on industrial boats, right? And then over the years, you've become a pioneer and expert in regenerative ocean farming. So your life story will probably inspire lots of people here. You actually wrote a book about it that has just been translated into French. Well, I'll come to that later. And so my first question, as your story is the story of a life journey, I would like you to tell us more about your beginnings in life.
Sure, yeah. A complete honor to be here. Amazing to hear everybody. I feel like I have the lowest IQ up here. It's kind of scary. So I was born and raised in Newfoundland, Canada. Little fishing village. Fisherman's co-op. All our houses were painted red, greens, and blues so we could find our way home in the fog when we were a bit drunk. And all I ever wanted to be was a fisherman. And I look back and ask why. And I think, they go out in the morning, they have self-directed lives, succeed and fail on their own terms, and have this pride of feeding your country and community. It's, these are the jobs we write and sing songs about. The coal workers, the farmers, the steel workers, the cowboys, these are like soul-filling jobs. And I think one of the questions in the era of climate change is how do we create jobs like that, jobs that we'll sing songs about. So when I was 14, I dropped out of high school and headed out to sea. Oh, okay. Okay. It's the beard. It's the beard. Oh. Can you hear me okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
And so dropped out of high school when I was 14 and headed out to sea, fished the globe, herring, lobster, tuna, ended up in Alaska in the Bering Sea, fishing cod and crab. And I love that, right? The humility of being in 40, 50-foot seas, that sense of solidarity of being in the belly of the boat. This is one of those jobs. The trouble was I was fishing at the height of industrialized fishing. We were tearing up entire ecosystems with our trawls. And I think, I didn't know it then, I didn't have words, but it's clear when you fish and you see seas of death around you, you think, oh, this isn't going to be, there's no future in this. The captains of industry are going to fish the last fish, but I want to die on my boat. That's like the metric of success, right? And that level of ecological destruction, that just wasn't viable.
Actually, at the beginning of the 1990s, you witnessed Newfoundland face struggling, right? Because there were no fish anymore.
Yeah.
It became increasingly difficult.
Absolutely. I mean, I've worked through 2 ecological collapses, right? And that first one, I was on the Bering Sea, and I got news that the cod stocks, the fish stocks, crashed in my home. 30,000 people thrown out of work overnight. And it is amazing to see an economy built up over hundreds of years, a culture, 100 years, just like decimated. And fishermen, walking the streets like hungry ghosts. And that's where I think there was a beginning of a change there where I thought I'm not an environmentalist, I'm not a foodie. I come at this as a climate solutions space. And I thought environmentalism was like saving seals and birds and bees. And that the environmentalists had always talked at me about that, But then when you see a culture collapse, you're like, oh my God, there aren't going to be any jobs on a dead ocean, on a dead planet. So that was the pivot where I went through this journey of ecological redemption in many ways, searching for a new relationship to the seas.
So you quit fishing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You tried aquaculture, but was not a big success, was it?
Oh my God.
You were on the salmon farm.
Yeah, on the salmon farms. And that was, everybody told me that was the great answer. Blue jobs, we're going to feed the planet, lower pressure on fish stocks. And it was like industrial pig farming out at sea. And pesticides, antibiotics, we were growing neither fish nor food. Like, I know the color of fish, I know the taste of fish, and this wasn't it. And it was, I think, everything that a solution shouldn't be. And the mistake aquaculture made, and it's still making, I think, is that it grew around markets, not around the ocean. So people want to eat salmon and tuna, cod, so they're like, okay, let's grow those. But that's a wild palate. Instead of asking the ocean, what does it make sense to grow? What's unique about the ocean as an agricultural space? And then growing around that. And so that's sort of been the bumpy journey I've been on since then.
So you started working on something else, on another solution to actually help feed the planet without ruining the planet. And you call this 3D ocean farming.
Yeah.
It's a bit mysterious. What is 3D ocean farming?
Well, we called it, so like I called it 3D ocean farming, underwater farming, settled on regenerative ocean farming, but really had no idea
what
to call it. Yeah. And so think of an underwater garden, and you've got anchors at the side, on the edges, then line we call rope line. Let's just say rope up to the surface, buoys, and then horizontal lines. It's a rope scaffolding system. And from there, you grow as many different crops as you can. And the key is, you ask the ocean, what does it make sense to grow? And the ocean says, why don't you grow things that don't swim away and you don't have to feed? Right? That's what's unique about the ocean. We can use that whole water column to grow many different species. We can grow seaweeds and shellfish together. You know, there are 11,000 different kinds of seaweeds in the ocean, hundreds of kinds of shellfish. There's something we can grow everywhere. But the other key here, just from a farmer's perspective, ocean farmer's perspective, is it's zero inputs. So no fresh water, no fertilizer, no feed. Everything we grow just uses the sunlight and nutrients. And that creates really low overhead. The business model becomes simpler. And as the price of food on land goes up because of fresh water and stuff like that, ours actually remains constant.
And how about kelp?
Yeah.
Among those things you grow in your 3D farm, vertical farm, there's kelp, and it's...
Yeah, I got it.
Why should we be interested in kelp and in seaweeds?
I have no idea. No. I mean, I have to be honest. Like, I wasn't that fascinated by kelp. What happened was I had an oyster farm, did quite well, and then I was destroyed. My farm was destroyed 2 years in a row by Hurricane Irene and Hurricane Sandy. Like, I was at the front lines of climate change. This was probably 15 years ago or something, and had to change. And it turns out that plants are easier to grow than animals. One of the fastest growing plants on earth is kelp. And I was able to use that scaffolding system, that vertical system, to grow seaweeds. And then that's been this journey of getting to know sort of seaweeds over time. And they're powerful technologies. I read a great French quote, actually. It said, like the firefly, seaweed can be more than it is. Like, it yearns to be something more than it is. And I think that's where we are in the era of climate change. So kelp, zero inputs, like I said. It's the sequoia of the sea, one of the fastest growing plants, soaks up carbon, nitrogen, rebuilds reefs. Like, it breathes life back into the ocean. It's also replicable, so like $20,000 to $50,000 you can start a farm. It's just ropes and buoys. It means a regular person like me can do this, but it is scalable. Like, I think one of the issues with the food movement, at least in the US, I can't speak for Europe in any way, is that it's still like small is beautiful or big is necessary, right? So vertical integration or sort of cute, Hudson Valley farms. And instead we need something that is about replication, network production, horizontal benefit, not vertical benefit, and kelp allows for that. And the scalability, I mean, if you were to take less than 4% of US waters to have regenerative ocean farms, you could replace the entire agricultural emissions of the state of California. So we can think big, but be distributed and have the benefits go to just, simple folks like me.
So 10 years ago, you created that non-profit organization called GreenWave.
Yeah.
And precisely to spread the methods that you developed. Can you please tell us more about this? What do you do at GreenWave?
Sure, yeah. So what happened was I had a lot of my fellow fishermen and lobstermen starting, well, like a handful coming because the lobsters disappeared in Long Island Sound. I mean, like, disappeared. Gill nets were coming up empty. And so I started training some folks, formed a little tiny nonprofit. Quite honestly, it was like slightly corrupt. It was just like little friends of mine, and I was trying to get them going. But then, built this training program, and 8,000 people signed up for the training program, just in the US, then over 100 countries, right? We were like, oh my, I'm allowed to swear, but I was like, holy shit, this is like unbelievable, right? And so my co-founder and I, Emily Stengel, got together and were like, okay, let's get serious about this. So we did a couple things. We built an online open source curriculum, 80 videos, how to train people. We've got 6,000 people in a ocean farming community where people are learning together. We have a subsidy program where you get paid to grow kelp and you give us data in return. So we've got a MyKelp app. We have a farmer-led infrastructure program, so like farmer-owned seed banks so we don't privatize seed. I mean, I think the benefit of this and why so many people came to it was like it's a blank slate. Like how often in history can we start from the bottom up, take all the lessons from land-based ag, from industrial agriculture, and like build something we're proud of that's beautiful to make sure that young people and beginning farmers can access, that leases are available, that we do polyculture, not monoculture. And it's amazing, if you grow kelp next to mussels, you get a 20% higher yield of mussels. So like Mother Nature doesn't want monoculture, wants diversity, and these species don't compete, they collaborate. So it's good for the environment, breathe the life of the ocean, but it's good for us that want to die on our boats. And like, I don't know who's going to write the first kelp sea shanty, but I'm waiting, right? Because we are proud of this, and that's where we really want to go. And imagine, like, we need to tap into that blue-collar innovation. Like, the amazing thing about not environmentalism, but I think the climate change era, which includes environmentalism, is that we can create this big tent, a just transition. We can take on this moral responsibility that if we're going to affect people's farms and lives and the kitchen tables and their livelihoods, we have to offer solutions. Like, the climate movement is not like the politics of no, it's the politics of yes. And that's how you get like people who look like they vote for Trump, not voting for Trump because I'm part of everyone on the stage. This is my community, and we're gettable. Like, I know you got folks protesting all over the country, farmers, and we have it in the U.S. where everyone's moving right. We can use climate solutions to actually create sort of a regenerative politics, right? And get the conversations and the stories and build something new out in the ocean. And to me, some extent, that's the most exciting part. Like, my folks protecting the oceans, not because they love like high-end food or they want to hang out at environmental rallies. They're there because this is where their souls are.
Your own farm is in the Thimble Islands,
Yeah.
right? It's off the coast of Connecticut.
Yep.
Does your model adapt to any kind of seas? Would it work in, like, say, Indonesia or the Caribbean, or can you do 3D farming there as well?
Yeah, so I don't know how to, because I'm a cold weather farmer, so we really work mainly in northern climates. But in our sort of knowledge network, we have a lot of folks that have been working on farms. And, you know, there's nothing new here. I didn't invent anything. I did take, like, a bunch of different types of farming and bring them together and make it economically viable. But, like, you know, a guy that was shipwrecked in Ireland, in France here, and he tried to net some birds. He put out a net, and all these mussels attached to the nets. That became the first mussel farm in history. Right? The indigenous communities in the Pacific Northwest did clam walls in order to make clams. Like, this is something that's happened. So in Indonesia and Latin America, all over this place, we just need to pull from that tradition. In fact, push soy off the plate, right? Push soy off the soil and move in these regenerative crops. And so it's not a new thing. It's more a discovery of a cuisine and a history that we've had.
What are the main obstacles that someone who would like to try that and to move into ocean regenerative farming? What should they expect?
Well, it's not for everyone. You got to be willing to break ice off the gunnel of your boat in the middle of the winter, right? Like, people come out for eco tours and they're like, oh, they come to the docks and just leave, right? So I mean, it's a physical demanding job. It doesn't mean you need to do that. We have, the seed banks, the hatcheries, the processing, the policy, the entrepreneurs that are doing these startups. There's many ways in, but so I think it's hard work. Like, I've got the body of a 70-year-old. Like, ask my wife. She's just like, this just is not working out, right? But the other thing is every day the weather's different, the ocean's different, the climate's different. So you need a mentality of flexibility and pivoting. And I think that is the nature of what it is to be a fisherman, right? So that psychology is really important. But whether on land and sea, like every day, volatility is what we face. And that's what it's a mental skill set. And I don't want to oversell this. I have to say something about like solution space. Very often we're like pitching and this is the answer and stuff. This is just a piece of the puzzle. Climate solutions are hard, they're expensive, they're bumpy. We have to do them, we have no choice. But like, actually I have a lot of hope from solutions coming together. The cross-pollination is as opposed to like me as the answer, solving all of these issues.
Are you convinced that consumers are ready to quit eating fish and try something?
No, not at all. I mean, changing consumer taste is slow. And what's the planet's going to die in 9 years or something, a decade, right? We don't. That's what the UN says. We got to move fast. Consumers, it is part of it. But I think we need like a multiple-tier strategy. And so how we've approached it is a whole leaf strategy for kelp. Shellfish has its own trajectory, but it's not as scalable in the same way. With kelp, the whole leaf, so yes, you do I make like, kelp curries and mustards and stuff like that for local restaurants. That boutique. Then you have the plant-based diets, the kelp mushroom burgers, things like that. And
there are recipes in your book, actually.
Yeah. But then also, the kelp can be used as bioplastics. But one of the things we're working pretty intensely now in is in soil amendments. So there's all these nutrients in the ocean that the land needs. It's this regenerative agriculture thing. And everybody was like, soil crisis. And I was like, shit, I got all your nutrients. I'll sell it back to you, right?
Reniera, that's for you.
Right, there it is. And it's amazing. So if the studies show that if you take seaweeds, you ferment it, actually break it down, get it into the soil, it provides heat and water, drought tolerance, so abiotic stress to land-based farmers. So it's actually like a value proposition for climate resiliency and allows you to reduce use on fertilizer and things like that. And I would say something about price point. Why I do think we're going to be eating this is the climate winds are at our backs as ocean farmers, because as the price of water goes up, fertilizer, land, feed, ours is going to remain constant, as I said. So I think naturally this is going to become regular folks' food. The question is it going to be disgusting or is it going to be delicious? I mean, we have an entire globe of amazing chefs that are specialized in making gross things delicious, right? And so we can tap into that. The other thing is, hide the kelp, right? Like it's an ingredient. Weave it into all these different industries. The soy industry did this. They sat there in the 50s with their cigars and their suits, and they're like, we're never going to get Americans to eat soy, so let's put it in everything. And I think we can replace a lot of ingredients that way.
Well, thank you, Bren, for this. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Inspiring example.
Okay, honor.
Thank you for speaking in spite of the jet lag. I know you're completely jet lagged, so thank you for the effort. I would like just to mention that Bren has written a book called, in English, Eat Like a Fish, but it was just published in French. So for those here that are interested, it's called in French Le Fermier des Océans, On peut tous changer de vie, published at the édition de l'Arbre qui marche. And there will be a book signing right now next to the bookstore. Bren is here, so please feel free to meet him there. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much.